I just wanted to make a bit of a presentation to talk about the current state of affairs of Arcane Energetics. It is the high explosives division of my company, and it's been a roller coaster trying to get licensing in these past 2 years, and so I felt that an update was appropriate and kind of giving an idea of what we've gone through, where we're at, and where we're trying to get with the energetics segment of the company. So this whole process with the ATF trying to get licensing to produce commercially started November 6th of 2023. So 2 years ago now, and we're rapidly approaching November of 2025 as I write this video and as I present it. And so, there are a set of requirements in federal statutes that I have to abide by. I have to send in fingerprints. I have to send in a completed application form. And I have to send in some means for them to extract $200 from me. I did everything I was required to. Unfortunately, they did receive the application within a very timely manner. They had the application within 5 days. But the issue I then ran into was that nothing happened after they took the tax stamp, which the fee that appeared on my bank account was misspelled. It was spelled AFT fee, which I don't know if someone did that on purpose or if it was just incompetence. At this point, everything seems to be incompetence when it concerns the ATF, and you're going to see why I say that later in this presentation. But anyway, a lot of time went by. We're talking 2 months. It was January, mid-January. When I finally contacted them, they never did contact me about the first application. They took my money, but they didn't do anything with the first application. So I contacted them, and I essentially said, look, I've been waiting for over 2 months now. I know you guys got the application because you took $200 from my bank account, so can you give me an update? Well, by the end of that month, we figured out what was going on. Apparently, they lost the first application. That's what they say, at least. And so I had to resend in an entirely filled out application with the application form and the 2 copies of fingerprints and so forth. And that was a headache, but we got it done. And they finally referred it to the field office at the very end of the month of January. So we're already getting close to the federal requirement of statute for timing. The federal requirement in 29 CFR, I believe, it might be 27 CFR, whichever one it is, they are required to process these applications within 3 months of receipt of the application. So by the time that the field office actually got the application, they had blown that federal statute out of the water. And that's going to be a repeating theme with the ATF as it concerns my experience. They just don't seem to care much about federal statutes unless they are those which they can use against you. If there's a statute that says they have to do something, they don't follow the federal statute. And so here, we were already over the 3-month statutory requirement, and that didn't matter to them. They just pretended like they didn't even see the first application, and they basically reset the clock in January, which has been a great point of contention between myself and that agency. Anyway, so they got everything moving at the field office, and then we ran into the issue of me needing guidance on constructing a magazine. I had always intended to construct my own magazine, but no one at the headquarters, when I was speaking to previously, was able to give me any guidance. They said, you're going to have to talk to the field office. So finally, we began talking about the magazine, and I found that the field office refused to give me a concrete set of parameters. Now, 27 and 29 CFRs, they make it very clear what your requirements are for a magazine. Everything from the thickness of the doors, to the thickness of the walls, to the material choices, how many hasps, how many locks. It's very clear cut. The issue is it's not been updated in 3 or 4 decades. So certain requirements for the locks, for example, are outdated. They want you to have carbide locks, which don't exist anymore. No one makes those locks in the way that they were legislated to be employed anymore. So to get those locks is nearly impossible. So the ATF has decided to come up with their own requirements. And not only that, each field office across this nation has its own set of requirements. There's no national standard for these de facto requirements. They're all just up to the discretion of the field office. And so because I couldn't come to an agreement with the field office because they kept coming up with discretionary issues, like how deep your magazine is going to be, or whether or not the kind of concrete you're using satisfies their requirements, which, I mean, I don't do concrete. You know, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm a business owner. I am not a bricklayer or a mason or anything like that. I don't work with stone. I don't work with concrete. I just went and got some concrete bags, some Quikrete, whatever you call it. And that was good enough for me. It wasn't good enough for them. So we kept negotiating. We couldn't come to a conclusion. I finally went over their head, and I went to the national director of the Explosives Industries Programs Branch. And I asked him, I said, look, I'm trying to work with the field office. They refuse to give me a set of parameters that I can design on, because every time I design something, they say, well, what about this? What about that? And it's not in federal statute. It's just stuff that they don't like. You know, they just have a feeling about. And so I came together with him. We had a phone call on the 11th, and then shortly thereafter, we exchanged emails so that I could get it in writing. That we had agreed upon a set of parameters, and then I designed that. And, you know, everything seemed to be going well. At that point, we had determined that my design did satisfy the federal statutes, 27 and 29 CFRs. So we were good to go there, and I moved forward. I built the magazine, and before the end of April, it was in the ground, and it was fully functional. Well, unfortunately, the field office came back into my life 2 days later, and they said, you know what, actually, we have problems still. And even though our national director has agreed to a magazine design, and now that you've constructed it, it's in the ground, even though these are true, we are not going to honor what he said. We're going to still have issues with your design and now with your construction. And they didn't give me any kind of written explanation. I heard hearsay from a few of the people who came over. You'll recall IOI Commune. He gave me some hearsay about, oh, well, they're still concerned about what kind of concrete you're using, or how deep the magazine is, and whether or not you're going to be able to actually use the magazine because it's too deep to, you know, they were coming up with all sorts of excuses that had nothing to do with federal statute. But they didn't write any of these down, and they would largely change as I would ask questions. I would ask a question one day, and it was the concrete. The next day, it's the depth. A day after that, they're concerned about whether or not there could be intrusion by animals or by theft or anything. And it's like I've satisfied the requirements. They just didn't want to adhere to federal law. And so a long time went by. We're talking 5 months passed, and nothing happened. They refused to talk to me. I sent numerous emails. I called. I sent text messages. No one was willing to communicate with me and tell me what was going on with the magazine or what I could do to fix the problems. Unfortunately, I took that to mean that they were just kind of, you know, waiting. It was just being processed. And so I decided that I would be proactive, since they were not going to be, and I would start advertising Arcane Energetics, the high explosives division of my company, online. And so I started building an online presence. I started posting videos about my company, some demonstrations. I started speaking on energetics forums and other, you know, defense forums, recreational explosives forums, things like this. And then the ATF got wind. Apparently somebody on one of those forums was very upset. They felt like I shouldn't be talking about high explosives, and somehow I was some kind of terrorist because I wanted to build a company around high explosives. And so what did the ATF do? They didn't contact me and say, hey, someone's talking about you. No, they sent 2 criminal enforcement agents to my property to threaten and harass me and to essentially say, look, we've got reports that you've been talking about explosives online, completely ignoring the fact that I was their applicant at this time. So I had a pending application for a federal explosives manufacturer's license for commercial manufacture. And they ignored that. They sent criminal enforcement agents to my property, and essentially the narrative was, well, we're getting reports that you're talking about manufacturing high explosives without a license, while I am an applicant for that license. So, the like I said before, it appears that there's either gross incompetence and they just couldn't keep track of the fact that I was their applicant, or it was an intentional obstructive measure meant to intimidate me out of pursuing the license any further, and certainly to intimidate me out of discussing the advancement of my company any further. And it's just a great difficulty of mine to understand why for 5 months they could not communicate with me at all. And then just a few days after I began talking online about my company, they had the resources to come and threaten me. That doesn't seem like coincidence. That seems like they were intentionally wasting time. And then finally, when I started moving forward, they said, oh no, you can't pass go. You can't collect $200. We're going to stop this right here. Anyway, they did what they did, and it was very unfortunate. And then just a few days later, they filed, IOI Christopher Camun filed a recommendation to deny the application based on the grounds that I did not have adequate storage. Now, as I said before, the EIPB National Director approved my design for storage, and no one told me at the field office what they had an issue with, even after he had approved it. Here, they recommended to deny, and 5 months at this point had passed since I had constructed the magazine, and I still didn't know what the issue was. They were recommending to deny my application based on insufficient storage, and they hadn't even told me what was insufficient about the storage that I had constructed for them. So, again, is it incompetence? Is it obstruction? I don't know. But in any case, that's what they decided to do. Shortly thereafter, I received the actual denial letter from them, I guess shortly, being relatively speaking at this point. And so a whole year had passed since I had began, and in fact, they waited until the day after they received the first application, which to me is not coincidence. Again, is it obstruction? It's certainly not incompetence for them to wait, exactly to that day for them to send the denial letter. So I think it's obstruction. I think it's very clear that they had no intention of issuing the license, and they were just finding an excuse. And then when I started to push back and say, I've done everything that I've been required to do, they decided that they were just going to make my life miserable. And so they waited until a day after they received the first application to send me a denial letter on the second application. So, of course, I appealed it immediately. 2 days later, I drove 3 hours to get to their field office in Dallas so that I could formally appeal the denial, and I felt that I had done everything I was required to by law, and I thought, it should be a very, open and shut issue. Well, come to find out, the tribunal was being conducted by a DEA administrative law judge, which I don't understand how the Drug Enforcement Agency has any purview over ATF proceedings. I suppose this is commonplace in government, but I still think it's a disgrace that I have to work with 2 different federal agencies just to get some kind of legal process. They decided during the tribunal to actually publish some of the internal documentation showing that they had recommended that denial so long before in August. I couldn't see that at the time. At the time, I had no idea that Camun, IOI Christopher Camun, had recommended to deny just a few days after they came to my property to threaten me. And so I was able to see that during the tribunal, so I guess that's a good thing. I got a little bit of clarity in what the process was actually doing. They gave me an updated timeline in that tribunal that showed what they were doing when. So I got to see that, they were discussing internally what things I was doing wrong for months, and they just refused to talk to me about those things that I was doing wrong with the magazine, which is a shame. If they had just talked to me, I could have fixed the issues. Finally, I saw what they were discussing. So, for the first time during that tribunal, I saw a written explanation for why the application should be denied, and this was all internal. I couldn't see this until I was in the tribunal and I requested discovery. So it just goes to show you how intentionally convoluted this was. They refused to tell me what I was doing wrong, but they internally had all of these long, drawn-out discussions about what they could say I was doing wrong. Kind of like finding a reason to charge somebody with a crime, just refusing to tell them what they're being charged for until they can get the reasoning straight. That's how it feels, and that's certainly not protection or service from this agency. And that's just part of the course with the ATF, and we're seeing that more and more nowadays. So I was able to finally determine what was wrong with my magazine, and I fixed it. There were just 3 issues that they had said. They were concerned with one of the hasps was loose, so I resecured it. They were concerned that water had gotten in. I took my my lid off. The magazine is vertical with a door that faces the sky, so if the door is off and it rains, water gets in. It's just how it's designed. I cleaned it out. I resecured it. It's watertight at this point. It's not putting any more water in the magazine. And then their third concern was that I had wood on the underside of the door. Per federal statute, I'm required to put 2 inches of hardwood. And I had used planks, and of course wood planks have cracks between them. You know, they're 2 separate pieces of wood, these planks, and so there's a crack. They said, oh, well, there's a crack between your wood planks, so technically it might not be the same thickness between the planks, so we're going to deny based on that. Which, again, it's just nonsense that they decided to come up with to justify something they had already decided on doing far beforehand. That's how I see it. I don't think they ever had any intention of issuing the magazine, the approval for the magazine. So anyway, I saw that they were upset about that, and what I did is I went down here. I live in a rural area. I found a tree cutting service. I asked them if they had any rings from a tree. They said yes. They cut me a ring. It was 4 inches thick. I cut that into a circle, and I put that on the underside of the magazine. So if they're upset because there's any natural cracks in that, slab of wood that I cut out of a tree, well, there's nothing I can do about that. You know, wood is wood. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a bricklayer or mason or anything. I don't work with concrete. I don't work with wood. You know, this is just me putting stuff together. But of course, when I submitted that evidence and I said, look, I have fixed the issues. I did it in record time. I think I fixed it in about 3 hours over the course of 5 days. And this was while I was dealing with personal injury and I was limited in transportation. After I submitted that, the government came back and said, look, this is proof. He didn't have a functional magazine when we started this. Now, I had everything set up the way that I had agreed to set it up with Director Mike Olina, National Director Mike Olina. I had changed that setup to meet their requirements. But the fact that I changed it was enough of a justification in their mind to say, look, he changed it, therefore he must have been guilty. And unfortunately, the Federalist magistrate that was assigned by the DEA agreed and said, you know what, I don't see an issue here, so I'm going to dismiss the case. So that happened in March, and here we are now in August, so another almost a year has passed here. And you know, this whole situation has been a travesty. You know, for 2 years, we've been fighting for this license for the company. I've been communicating with them constantly, even so much so that they refused to communicate with me. They got sick of hearing from me. I wish they would have communicated with me. None of this would have had to happen if they had just protected and served, as is their obligation. But they didn't do that, and unfortunately, I have lost time. I've lost a lot of money. Not just money in building the magazine and pursuing the other, trivial nonsenses that they've forced me to go about, but also lost money in revenue. I could have been making money this entire time producing products, and as a courtesy, I shut down. I put my production unit for energetics on standby for the last year and a half. I had started producing, and then when this stuff started to snowball out of control, I paused it because I didn't want them to, think that I was going to be non-compliant. And then they sent criminal enforcement agents to my property anyway, and I was like, well, why am I pausing this? But I kept it paused. Well, now that I'm here, I realize that there's not really any progress to be made here. They refuse to honor the magazine that I constructed with their national director's approval. They refuse to honor the fact that I have been nothing but cooperative. Every form, every fee, every time they wanted me to apply and reapply or get new application materials, I've done everything that they've asked me to do, and I've done it in disciplined time. I've gotten everything done that they asked me to do within a reasonable time frame every single time, and yet they still have wasted 5 months at a time. They have ignored me for months and months when I've been trying to get some guidance. They threw away the first application, like it just didn't matter to them that they had even received an application. And that goes beyond incompetence. That goes towards an intentional obstruction. And I told my federal representatives about this. I said, look, I've been dealing with them for 2 years, and I've been telling them consistently. I've been dealing with them for 3 months, for 5 months, for a year and a half, for 2, they've been along the ride for this whole process, and they have done nothing. And it shows that not only is there an intentional obstruction within the ATF, within the agency, but there is an obstructive bureaucracy within Congress. They don't want to fix this problem. My representative, Nathaniel Moran for the 1st District of Texas, I told him about this, and his solution was to create a new bureaucracy where the Small Business Association can exempt a small business from requirements of federal statute if they are unreasonable. Well, of course, the SBA is not going to say that this magazine requirement is unreasonable, even though I've gone through this 2.5-year process with the ATF on it. They're going to say, well, no, as it's written, it's doable, it's possible to do it. Well, I've proven it's not, but they're not going to honor my suffering here. They're going to assume that I just don't know what I'm doing, which maybe I don't, but if I don't know what I'm doing, and I put all this time and effort into trying to prove that I can do this the way that I want to do it. I want to build a magazine. I don't want to pay for a magazine, which, just so you understand, these magazines that they approve of prematurely, that you can buy, they start at $10,000. So it was me building a magazine, or me spending a huge chunk of money on a metal box that I'm probably never even going to have a use for because I don't intend on having any storage on site. So the SBA strategy that my congressman came up with was a complete sham. It wasn't going to do anything for me, but it looked great on paper, and I think that's exactly why he got it passed, so that he could say, look, I'm doing all these great things for you, when in reality he's just adding to the bureaucracy. And that's really unfortunate because he claims to be a conservative. He's from the 1st District of Texas. You would think that he would want to help me cut some red tape, and instead he just added to it. So the situation now is I really have lost faith in the federal government's ability to do much of anything. I've been dealing with them on other licensing as well, and that's just been a mess. But there is a path forward. I don't technically have to get an ATF FEL-20 commercial license. The commercial license only kicks in if I'm doing interstate commerce where there's a transfer of material. So if I was to manufacture explosives and then sell those explosives to someone else and basically just give it to them and walk away, that's a transfer, and that requires an FEL-20. But if I manufacture materials for my own internal consumption, that's not their problem. They don't control that form of energetics regulation. They only control storage. And so the whole issue with me transferring it to someone else is that it goes from being my responsibility to store to their responsibility to store. That's where their power comes from. So if I never transfer anything, they don't have any purview. If I'm moving it from place to place, that's not a transfer. That's just transport, so to speak. And that's covered by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So they don't have any control there. If I use it, that's not anyone's concern. Actually, the actual use of explosives doesn't fall into any federal concern. There might be a state regulatory agency like the Texas Railroad Commission that might deal with that. But they don't. The ATF doesn't control use or transport. So what I'm looking at now is going an entirely internal to the states pathway. I'm already looking into blasting licensing for my company. I have had TxDOT hazmat endorsement for myself since 2024, so I'm good to go. If I need to move my product, I have the placards, I have all the other things, and EX numbers, which are required for transport, are readily available. Now, again, it's this whole, if you want your own EX number, you have to pay $10,000 to have somebody give you an EX number, which, again, it's a racket, because if you get your EX numbers in the first place for $10,000, you can add new EX numbers to the existing ones for free. There's no extra charge. Just in the same way that the ATF says, oh, well, all you have to do is get a magazine. You just have to pay $10,000 to buy their pre-approved magazine first, and then you can get your license, and it's no issue. This is how they keep people out of the industry. They tell you that you have to pay $10,000 for a metal box to put your materials inside. You have to pay $10,000 to get a number so that you can transport your materials, and then there are countless other fees. This is all obstructive. This is protectionism. It's intended to protect companies like Dyno Nobel that have been around for 200 years and don't know anything in the form of innovation at this point. Like they're just dead at the wheel. And so to keep their company alive, they just make sure that no one else can compete with them by making it prohibitively expensive to enter into the industry. That's where I'm at right now. I don't really care that they have decided to do this. I mean, it's a shame. The whole reason I went through the process with them was to prove that I could do it. And now I've proven that I can't do it, and that's fine. I mean, it didn't matter to me whether or not they worked with me. It just mattered to me that I showed that I did everything the right way. And I've done it the right way. They just refuse to honor their oaths and obligations. And that's a shame. And, you know, there's going to be a reckoning in this country for that kind of behavior, that treasonous behavior, soon enough. So the company is still going to move forward. You know, at the end of the day, this was a test to see whether or not the federal government, with the ATF and other agencies, was willing to work with me. As a now 26-year-old, I started this company when I was 24. You know, they refused to work with me. For 2 years, no one at the federal level has worked with me, and that's okay. I'm going to keep moving forward. The company, its agricultural division is doing fine. The industrial portion of the company is moving forward very quickly. And they're not going to slow me down. You know, at the end of the day, if they want to come out here and start, you know, some kind of major incident, they've done that in Arkansas. They've tried to do it in Maryland. They did it in Waco. They did it in Ruby Ridge. If they want to come out here and do something, they're going to do it, and I can't stop that. But I am going to keep moving forward with my life. I'm not going to put everything on hold to make these people happy. And, you know, I don't think they're going to be happy unless my company folds, and that's just not going to happen. You know, I've spent too much time and energy and money investing into this vision of mine, and I'm going to see it through. And so that's where we're at, and I look forward to the future of my company. And if you want to support my company, reach out. Let me know. Say, hey, you know, I agree with what you're trying to do. I understand why. It's important for there to be small producers of high explosives so that we're not all dealing with a monopoly, and in the worst case, so that we have some way of providing for ourselves if things come to a head in this nation. And you know, let me know what you think about it. Or if you disagree with me, let me know that too. I'd love to hear what the public thinks about this process that I have had to endure for 2 years now. But I'm looking forward to the future, and I have no interest or intention of slowing down now. Thanks.